the only way that that void is soothed is when I have an amazingly beautiful, vulnerable conversation with another human being. And that sensation of feeling connected to someone, of feeling seen, of feeling loved, is the most amazing sensation in the world. And I think this is what life is about. And I think the reason why I was put on this earth is to make sure that as many people as possible have that sensation.
I'm Karine, and this is The Seat of the Muse, a show I started out of love for meaningful conversations and a curiosity about the stories behind what people do. Each episode is an invitation to sit down, slow down, and listen in, because sometimes a single story can shift how we view our own. This is a space for the stories we don't always hear, the ones behind the titles, the passions, the quiet turning points, and the worlds hidden in plain sight. Now let's get into today's episode. So Carolina, thank you so much for being on the Seat of the Muse podcast, and welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you're here, like genuinely. So you're a conversationalist, human behavior expert, and the founder of No Small Talk, a platform that creates real-life spaces for meaningful connection. So before starting any session, I like to ask my guest one question. Imagine we're doing this in front of an audience. Who is one person that you would want to see in your front row, and why?
In my front row for No Small Talk, or in general?
Just in general, based on, I guess, the conversation we'll have today.
I guess someone that I really admire historically. Well, actually, I should say first, thank you very much for having me. I am a little bit nervous, but it will be okay.
You'll be fine towards the episode.
That, I'm sure like the first it's like a bit like No Small Talk. The first 5-10 minutes, you're a bit like in a panic. And then you're like, oh, actually, everything is okay. I think someone that I really admire historically is Catherine the Great, because she was an incredibly badass woman, and she was a woman in a moment of incredible, difficult historical period for women, and she kicked so many men's asses, and I just think that's so cool.
I love that.
So yeah, Catherine the Great.
Okay, perfect.
For some strong inspiration.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And so obviously, like, more than a month ago now, I registered for a dinner at House of Cocoa here in London. Didn't really know what to expect. Walked in thinking I was going to have just like a casual dinner. First thing I see is my phone gets taken from me. And
sorry.
And in exchange, I'm given a card with a question on it. And you tell me I need to go into a room full of strangers and just ask as many people as possible that question. I think that experience is still, like, I carry it with me still to this day. I tell it to so many people. I think it's an amazing experience, honestly. And I want our listeners to know, because they clearly have no clue what I'm talking about here. But in your own words, can you tell us what is actually No Small Talk, and what was that experience that I had, basically?
So I guess in a nutshell, what No Small Talk is a place for better conversations, to put it incredibly simply. Are you bored of asking and answering, where are you from? What do you do? Where do you live? Oh, you live in London? Where in London do you live? Oh, great. Oh, cool. So interesting. Can you believe this weather? Nobody wants to talk about that. Everyone's bored about talking about this. And the problem is most people don't know how to have a different type of conversation. So effectively what we do is we provide a space where that doesn't happen. And more concretely, what we do is we, first of all, give people permission. And I say permission very much in inverted commas, in the sense that, we gently guide them towards behaving in a different way. And not only giving people the permission, but also the tools, the environment, the people, so the community, to behave in a different way. And the result is to have better conversations, more memorable conversations, and more fun conversations.
And I think it's a super nice experience. It can be a bit daunting for people, because you have to go outside of your comfort zone to be comfortable, to be in a space where you absolutely don't know anyone, and in a certain way, I guess, show a bit of vulnerability. Who do you think it was made for originally when you thought of that? And how would you entice people to maybe join that, even if they are from that, crowd of people that are introverts, don't really feel like they can step out of that comfort zone, but they feel like it could be a great idea for them, but they just don't have the courage to do it?
Yeah, Okay, so I'll answer first on who is it for and then the second part. So who is it for? So if I think, we've been lucky enough to do No Small Talk really in pretty much all four corners of the world. No Small Talk was born in Hong Kong when I was living there. So we've done it in Asia, we've done it in continental Europe, in the UK, in America. And there are definitely certain commonalities that I see about the people that come. So definitely people that come are all curious. They're all adventurous. They are mostly quite international, open-minded. They are introverted and extroverted. They are single, married, in a throuple, whatever it is. It's not a dating event. A lot of people get confused, but it's not a dating event. Like any other dinner, you could meet a single person, you could meet a person that is married. And then generally the gender is 60% women, 40% men. So if you're a man watching, please very much consider this a sign to come to No Small Talk, log in into our website and book our next event. And so with who is it for, I think those are really the attributes that I see. So for the second question, it's a question that is very important to me. And the reason why it's important to me, because first of all, I really, truly empathize with this idea of something like this being nerve-wracking. First of all, because I've been to similar things and I know how nerve-wracking it is. You're going into a new space, you don't really know what to expect, new people, like that is scary, right? And so I'm hyper aware of that. And the last thing that I want is for anyone to feel unwelcomed, unloved, unseen. That is literally like the worst. And so now, that's my sentiment. How do we actually resolve for that problem? So first of all, as I said, we really make a point in making people feel welcomed. We're literally human Labradors of some sort. And to me, that really comes from a place like something that happened in my childhood, which seems small, but it really affected me. And a small little personal story, I was, I think, 8 or 9 years old. My parents are really into hiking in the mountains. And so they would spend their holidays in the mountains and they were quite social. So we were always surrounded by different kids. And one time I walked into this room and I'm supposed to, go on a hike with all these new girls. And this girl, just as I'm walking into the room, she has her back at me and she doesn't realize that I'm there. And she says to these other girls, "Oh my God, it's so annoying that Carolina is going to be there." And there's a 9-year-old that really broke my little tiny fragile heart. And I really want to make sure that nobody ever feels that in any of our events. And so it's really something super important to me that people feel welcomed. So that's my personal kind of story with this. But if you are, nervous, which I understand, other things to think about and to kind of be aware of is, so 75 to 95% of people come by themselves. So you're put in a situation where you're with similar people who are going through the exact same thing. And that, by the way, immediately creates a level of bonding for sure. It's definitely a big one. And I think could be helpful to see it as a challenge a little bit as well. Like there's this saying, I think it goes, comfort zone is a nice space, but growth never happens there. And so, think about that. Now you know me. Hopefully by the end of the podcast, you'll know me better. And please know that I will never, ever, ever, ever make you feel unwelcomed and kind of not loved from the moment you arrive here. It's very important to me.
Well, thank you for sharing that, little story. I didn't know it. And, we also went for a walk before and talked about all of this. And I think you anyway do feel that, because I remember the minute I stepped in, I was welcomed by a big hug, made super welcome. So I do think that really actually works. And I also, after the event, encouraged my friends. I was telling them about it and I was saying they know I'm very social. I would love those kind of things. And literally it's made for me in some ways. And when I would tell them oh, I went to this dinner, I went alone and I had to open up to people and be asked random questions, they were also surprised and they were I wish I had the guts to do it. And I try to encourage some of them, to go, because it puts you in a certain space where you have to grow within. And I think that is super important. And so,
and by the way, sorry, just one thing to add. You can also come with a friend. That's not a problem at all, right?
Don't say that. We need them to go alone.
I mean, we have some people coming with a friend, and that's totally fine. And we just kind of, for certain part of the experience, we separate them. But I totally understand how nerve-wracking it is. So if you need to come with a friend, come with a friend.
Yeah. And so can you walk us through maybe the journey of, no small talk guests from the moment they actually, go on your website, sign up, what should they kind of expect? And obviously we want to leave some element of surprise. You maybe not want to share the whole thing, but just a bit like how, that experience would actually take place.
Yeah. So I'm afraid I'm going to give an annoyingly vague answer. And that's very much on purpose, because if you go on our website, for example, you'll see there's really not that much explanation. And I think that's very much on purpose, without sounding like like an old boomer. I think that in this day and age, like nothing is a surprise anymore, right? Like with the internet, social media, like everything is out there. And if I think about, for example, happy moments in my childhood where I had elements of surprises, and the one that comes to mind is Easter egg hunt. Like I was obsessed with that, like element of surprise. You don't really know what's going to happen. And so that's to say we try and keep things purposely a little bit vague. But please do trust us and come. But what I can say is that there is, let me think, what can I say? Not that much, actually. Wait, let me look at my notes. I think I wrote down what I could say. Yeah. No, I literally wrote down this. That's it.
Don't say anything.
Yeah, literally don't say anything. Helpful, I know. So what I can say is that the process starts before you even come, because we want to make sure that everyone is aligned, and that we will make you feel welcomed, and just take a little risk, trust us, and I promise you it will be worth it. And if you hate it, you can always run away and pretend like some emergency happened, and we won't take offense. We never had that happen, so it should be okay.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it happening, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, fair enough. And so you were raised between, high society, political influence, so you've been privy to some, like, maybe very surface level conversations. But I want you to kind of take me through maybe your upbringing, how that shaped you and then got you to doing, small talk. Not just maybe from your like upbringing on family side, but also I know you've worked, in fashion media, like around the world. So just all of that together up until how we got to you actually doing no small talk.
Yeah. So I think there's really 3 things that made me start, 3+1 things that made me start No Small Talk. The first one is definitely my childhood, where I grew up, going to a lot of these like fancy schmancy events where it's the best possible food ever. It's the best, most exclusive location that no one can get access to, the most amazing popular entertainer and amazing lighting and amazing everything. But at the end of the day, these events are so boring, and they're full of people who are not looking at you. They're looking behind you to see if the next cool person is coming by. Nobody is really present. Nobody's having any good conversation, and yet everyone wants to have just that, and they just don't know how to do it. And so this, for me, I always find it so weird how you would be surrounded by people and yet not feel connected, and that dissonance between being surrounded by people and not feeling connected always felt like very like loneliness inducing to me. And I just always found it weird, like because I was quite young, and I was like, what, these all adults, like, what is wrong with you guys? Like, why are you behaving this way? And so that was definitely a big thing. And then when I was a little bit older, I started working as a journalist in fashion for Vogue, L'Officiel, and a few of other these lifestyle magazines. And as part of that, I had to interview and talk to a lot of people. And I really started seeing firsthand the power of good questions, and how a good question would lead to a good conversation, and vice versa with a bad question. And then eventually I moved to Asia, in a very small talk heavy city like Hong Kong. And I really started looking into the science of connection and in the human behavioral science of how you can leverage human behavioral science to kind of help us with having connection. And it turns out that there is a way that you can leverage science, and we all want it, and we all want to feel connected. We just don't know how. And the plus one is, when I was living in Asia, I worked in the corporate world for LVMH, and I really saw firsthand how important that connection is also in businesses, which is a big inspiration why we started doing also B2B services with No Small Talk.
Amazing. And so you started the No Small Talk experience in Hong Kong, right? And is that when you were still at LVMH and you felt like you needed to connect maybe with more than just colleagues, and you decided to do that to maybe make friends? Like, was it something that started for personal reasons, or because you saw kind of that need from people around you?
It's a really good question, and I think there's two ways for me to answer this question. One is more surface level, and one is a lot more, I would say, personal. There's definitely that element of kind of surface level to a certain extent, where it's like, yeah, I was bored of asking the same questions and answering the same questions over and over and over and over again. And it's like this, you go into this socializing autopilot, right? Like, and I wanted to break from that socializing autopilot. So there's definitely that. But if I really kind of take a hard look at myself and think about why I started No Small Talk, if I'm very kind of honest, and this is definitely vulnerable for me to share, but I should practice what I preach. I think for me, it really came from a place of loneliness where growing up, the sensation I've always had, I always had this like deep feeling of just like a void inside me, and a loneliness that I always carried, and I still carry, by the way. And what I realized is that the only way that I can heal that void, the only way that that void is soothed, is when I have an amazingly beautiful, vulnerable conversation with another human being. And whether it's a friend, whether it's a partner, a new friend, a stranger. And that sensation of feeling connected to someone, of feeling seen, of feeling loved, is the most amazing sensation in the world. And I think this is what life is about. And I think the reason why I was put on this earth is to make sure that as many people as possible have that sensation. Yeah.
I think I think that's really nice, and thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable here. It is a safe space, and I will say, like, obviously, like when we got to like the third part of the dinner, I exactly felt that way, and I think I told you that, like, it's so strange because when I left the dinner, I told my friends, I think there's a stranger out there that knows more about myself than any of you do, and even my family maybe. And there's this thing where you feel like you can open up to a stranger more easily in some ways, especially if they share that same maybe vulnerability, or like they have something in common, which comes through in maybe the experience that you create. So that allows for that. And I think that's really beautiful because not a lot of people get the chance. I think we take it for granted how we have, friends around us, family, people we can meet, whether just like, socially, but also like on a deeper level. But you have a lot of people who don't have that many friends, don't have the opportunity to maybe go out that much and meet people. So offering that space is, I think, really, really, really important.
And sometimes, by the way, you have maybe even a lot of friends, but you're so used to having a kind of a relationship, a dynamic with them, that it's really hard to break that and be like, all of a sudden I'm going to be vulnerable. So that's why often people feel like it's much easier to just kind of tell your secrets to a stranger, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And honestly, like, obviously, you're definitely not the only one, feeling the sense of loneliness. Like, the numbers are really alarming around us if we look at them. Like, we're in an age where solitude is, rampant, and the World Health Organization named loneliness a global public health concern. Like, just in the UK, 45% of adults say that they sometimes feel lonely. In the US, more than half of people report feeling actually disconnected and lonely. And so it's so interesting that, so many people feel that, especially today. Like, genuinely, I think loneliness has the same health impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so why do you think that we're more and more disconnected and feeling lonely when we're actually in an age where, like, thanks to technology, we can be connected like constantly and all the time?
And to add to that piece of research, they because I love this piece of research because I think it just tells you everything that is kind of wrong in the world right now. They looked at 300,000 people and they looked at the risk factors that influence death. So as you said, like cigarettes and stuff. And so they looked at, for example, cigarette and alcohol are obviously pretty up there with the risk of death. But the thing that is even more likely to make you die is loneliness. And not only that, but loneliness is more likely to make you die than physical health. So in other words, you could be someone who is overweight, but have a great network of friends, or being emotionally supported and feel a level of connection, and your likelihood of a long life are way bigger than someone that maybe is like an Olympic athlete body, but doesn't have that connection, right? And I think it's so interesting because our culture is focused on physicality and like how you look, but actually what matters is your brain, of course, and how you feel connected with other people.
Yeah. And then do you think then for you that loneliness is always about the absence of people, or can it exist in a room actually full of them?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's the moments I probably felt the most lonely was when I was in a room full of people. I think it has nothing to do with how many people you're surrounded with, but I think it has to do with allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to have good conversations, to ask good questions, and to listen actively when people reply, and really come to a human with a level of curiosity.
Yeah. And do you think like when you've watched people, at all those dinners that you've hosted, how do you feel like people are changing? Like, do you see any shift in maybe their behavior, their like even maybe posture, or anything that would show that over a few hours they've come maybe more comfortable with the idea of talking to a stranger?
Yeah, for sure. We definitely see those shifts. And I think part of it is making people, like part of the reason why we have those shifts is making people realize a few things. So one thing we always talk about is this idea of universal identity. So let me ask you, Karine, have you ever had an irritating discussion with a family member?
Probably.
Have you ever made a silly mistake at work?
Yeah, definitely.
Have you ever had any kind of issues with your body, whether it was self-perception or something broken?
100%.
Do you want to be loved?
Of course.
Do you have ambitions?
Yes.
Right? Everyone is going through this universally lived experience. And I think when you really realize that we're all living our own little lives, but they're all so much more similar than we realize, then what you end up realizing is that you're not special. I'm not special. Nobody is special. And I say this with like the most amount of self-love for you, for myself and for you. But this idea that what I'm living through is not special, which means my problems are not special, which means if I share my problems, it's not special, because chances are a million other people are living through the exact same thing. And so when you kind of demonize that, then it's so much easier to just be vulnerable and yourself. And there's so much freedom that comes from just realizing that you're not special. Like, it's so beautiful and freeing, and just like, okay, whatever. Like, life is so much better, And I think this is really what I learned through doing No Small Talk all these years, is that I am not special in the best possible way.
Yeah. That's actually interesting. I haven't looked at it that way, but it kind of makes sense. Like, I even remember having conversations maybe with friends very recently where they would share, how they feel, and think that it only, like, they're the only ones in the world who actually feel that. And when I would reply like, oh, I've been through that, last year maybe, or like, I've been through this situation, then they feel like a sense of relief. They're like, I'm so glad I'm not the only one who feels that way, and who's been through this. And I think that then creates even a connection, like you say, and you feel like, okay, my problem is not as big. I mean, it is big, like, it's not to maybe, minimize how one should feel, but it's more to make them realize that they're not alone in this. And that, I think, is very comforting.
Yeah, and don't minimize it, but share it, because the moment you share it, you realize, actually, this is okay. This is part of like the universally lived experience that we're all experiencing, right? We're all here. Nobody knows why we're alive. We all have our issues. We all have our ambitions. It's okay.
Yeah. And so if we come back a bit to no small talk as the experience, I know we're not going to be sharing too much, but I think it's safe to say that throughout the experience, you have asked questions that help you build those connections. Obviously, you're not just thrown in a room and then, they tell you talk, but then just don't do small talk. There are some questions that come and play. How do you kind of design the experience? Do you leave rooms on purpose for vulnerability to come in and maybe even like awkwardness, etc.? Is there something you can share about the thought process behind that?
Everything is driven by human behavioral science, psychology, a little bit of an element perhaps of performance art, a lot of A/B testing, and a lot of lived experiences. That's all I have.
Okay. I think it leaves a bit of like room of like a little curiosity, like people will want to understand like what the hell are you talking
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I think it's great. Like, people can go on the website, get a sense of what actually no small talk is. And I really encourage people to actually do that because the experiences are so fun. Fun is a big word, but like very interesting and fun to some extent, obviously. And so, there are rules where like you ban phones, you ban the small talk. But I realize like it still is stronger than, us. Like I went through the whole dinner, no small talk, nothing at all. Like was talking to stranger, no clue where they came from, what they did in life or anything. But then towards the end of the evening, I still had that urge to ask. And I don't know why, it's just like, it became at some point not even small talk. It's just, I'm really like more curious about knowing that. Do you feel like it's still wrong to do that after a full conversation of like, going deep in discussions, still going back to that surface level of, so where do you live in London? What do you do?
Yeah, I really, really don't think so, in the sense that I think it's totally fine to have like context about people, right? And we all want it. The problem is when your first approach is, I want to get the context and I'm just gonna draw a conclusion based on that, right? And that's just like, you're not gonna have good conversations or feel like a connection with people. And I'll tell you an example of something that happened like only last week. I went to this dinner and from the get-go I have this like really nice deep conversation with a guy, like beautiful. We talk about our partners, how he just got engaged, and how the dynamic between them was. And I talked to him about my partner, the dynamics and the kind of like ups and downs that we go through, and we have this very, very deep conversation. And then at the end of it, I'm like, oh, by the way, what do you do? Because of course, like that's part of who people are, right? Anyway, it turns out that he runs a social media agency, a very, very famous social media agency, and we're just beginning to do marketing with No Small Talk because we've never done marketing. We've all been only word of mouth, friends of friends, and now we're starting to do a little bit of social media. Let's see where that goes. But and anyway, the result of that is like, we're going to go next week. He's going to sit down and give us some advice about, how to go on about social media. And so the end result is the same, right? But it's actually probably a lot better and deeper because now I have this connection with him and I just know him as a human, not as his like LinkedIn profile, right? Yeah. And that is so much more meaningful. And I'm sure that he's going to really make sure that he actually helps us because he can see me as a person, right? And I shared stuff and he shared stuff. And so, yeah, ask what you do. And you can make small talk. There's just a better way to do it. There's just a better way to arrive at the same end result.
Mm-hmm. No, I fully agree. And I think that's great. And in some ways, like, that's kind of why I do this podcast. Because, I go out a lot, like I meet very, very interesting people. Obviously, I ask like, what do you do? But that's just because if I find it interesting, I want them to come on and talk about what they actually do. But it's also to go beyond that just title and understand the person behind it, what drives them, why they do what they do, how they got there. So I think that's like generally it's like such a good thing to have. Like it's like a tool you have that if you're able to connect with someone, like, the world is your oyster in some ways. And so you've hosted, No Small Talk in private homes, in Members Club, where I attended one. and in even hotels, etc. How operationally, like if we want to, move more to the operation side of it, how does it differ, like in preparing for those events? And then do you think like you're leaning towards one way or the other for the future of No Small Talk?
So with No Small Talk, so it was started like as a D2C, where it was really like I was living in Hong Kong. I was bored of having the same conversation over and over again, and I just wanted my friends and I to have better conversation. And then from there, it evolved in what it is now. And now we have our own dinner experiences, which we do in private homes, and then we have this B2B vertical that comes to life with, for example, a members club where we engage their own member community, because I think personally is something that members club could do a much better job at. But also B2B services are anything like, as to your point, like a luxury hotel that has their guests there overnight. And, like, for example, I think a hotel is such a good example, because when you go to a nice hotel, and I'm a sucker for nice hotels, you want to talk to the people that are around you, right? And most people are too scared to do that. They're not extroverted enough. You don't know how to approach them, but yet everyone wants that, right? And so with the B2B services, effectively what we do is we take the spirit of No Small Talk and bring it to different environments. And it could be a hotel, but it could also be a team building exercises, like really human connections at the heart of anything that we do. So we can adapt the spirit and the concept of No Small Talk in many different scenarios.
Yeah. And so do you think that going forward you will like step away from doing it in private homes and maybe look to do it more, with businesses? Is that something where you see No Small Talk going?
I mean, businesses is the thing that makes us revenue. Our own dinner experiences, we don't make revenue. So we have to do that unless we all want to be broke. So that will definitely, which we don't want to, so that will definitely have to happen.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, that's fair. And I think it's nice to have the balance. You can still do the ones where you don't maybe earn from them, and then the other ones that will help you grow 100%. And so obviously, as you say, it's all about human connection, and you offer that in a specific space. But how do you think it would be so helpful for people to maybe use that in their work, their love life, their friends, their family, if there's something that they can take away from the experience? Because obviously you can do it behind those doors, but the minute the experience is over, it's very easy to just go back to just however everything is. It takes effort and actually being very aware of what you're trying to do when you're having conversations with people, to not have that maybe small talk. How do you feel it can be used outside of that space?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to awareness. And one of the nicest feedbacks we get is after coming to this experience, it just made me a bit more aware of the socializing autopilot that I normally go into. And as I said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's really about just asking slightly better questions. And if you need ideas, we are just about to launch our social media channels. So we'll share there some examples, right? But I think it's really just about asking a slightly different question and just not going into autopilot and behaving the same way, but stop for 1 second and say, okay, hold on. Let me just approach this in a different way and see where it goes, and go into that conversation with curiosity, be obsessively curious. So.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially the way you say, it's how you phrase the question, because in the way you phrase it, you can give clues or allow the other person to answer in a way that will lead to an even better an even better question, and so forth. And that opens up a whole discussion and connection.
Yeah.
So.
And I think also your mom was wrong. You can talk to strangers. Your mom was completely wrong on that one.
Just not on the streets at 5 a.m.
Exacto. But another, I think, really interesting study on this is they ask commuters to, during their commute, do either one of three things. Either talk to a stranger on their commute, be in isolation, or do whatever they normally do. And they asked all of them, they asked the ones they ask them before their commute if they think that they would enjoy talking to a stranger. And the vast majority said, no way, I will hate it. This is going to be so uncomfortable. Guess what? When they do go and talk to a stranger, actually, like, they love it, and there's incredibly, like, the quality of their commute really, really greatly increased positively. So what this experiment showed is that we all want to connect. We actually all want to talk to strangers. It's just that everyone is a little bit scared to do it, and we don't know how. If you don't know how, come to a No Small Talk dinner experience. We'll show you how, and then at least start from there, and then we'll see.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think it's funny because we all want to connect with people, but we're all scared of doing it. And I think the part, like, why we're scared is very important to understand as well. It can be very different for different people, but I think more often than not, it's like the fear of being rejected, maybe. I don't know if you've seen that across with people or not, but I guess for me that would be it. If I can share something about, you know, on my side, it's like I would fear if I try to approach a complete stranger just to talk, you know, it doesn't have to be like for any particular reason. The fear of being rejected is immediately something you think about, and you're like, oh my God, what if that happens? But then I wonder, okay, that happened, so what? This guy or this girl was a stranger, would just go back to just being stranger, right? And that moment will be forgotten in an instant.
Yeah. I think one thing I think about a lot in the context of approaching strangers and kind of the fear of that, what I try to remind myself a lot is the saying, what Sally says of Susie says more about Sally than Susie. And in other words, what this means is that what you judge on says a lot more about you as a person than the person you're judging, right? And so similarly, if someone rejects you, effectively, they're judging you, right? And that says everything about them and nothing about you, right? And if I think, for example, about stuff I judge people on, that literally says everything about me, about my insecurities, about, for example, the fact that I have a massive intelligence complex. So I judge girls that are you know, like, for example, when I'm at a dinner and I see a girl who's like kind of cute and doesn't speak a lot, I judge that immediately. And then I'm like, why? Well, you judge that because growing up, you were always kind of a bit objectified. And so I have this ginormous intelligence complex where I have to be like, I have to add value, I have to entertain. And so when I see someone that doesn't do that, I think I'm like secretly jealous, but my way to cope with that is to judge, right? But this says everything about me and not this like poor girl who's just sitting there and like chilling, right? Yeah. And realizing that, you realize it doesn't matter like if people judge. And I know it's way easier to say than done, but like, so you know, keep these things in mind to just be like, okay, this person's gonna reject me because they drew some conclusion on me based on like a 2-second interaction. Oof, wow.
Yeah,
I hope they figure out and they do the self-work to understand where that comes from, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's actually so true and a good way to look at it. Like I haven't even considered it or thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing it. And so as we close this, and I've had honestly an amazing conversation with you, and that was so nice. If there is one question maybe from all of your decks that you prepared that you'd like to leave our listeners with, you know, something to carry into their next conversation, what would it be?
So, okay, definitely. So for me, my favorite question changes quite often, but I would say the one that I love right now is, what is one bad and one good trait that you inherited from each of your parents? And I really, really like this question right now. But we will start posting regularly on social media, just like good question to ask. But right now I'm really, really into this one.
Interesting. I'm not going to ask you for the answer. We'll do it when we're offline.
Okay, perfect. Because I will ask you. Okay, well, I was going to ask you yours, but then I'm going to put you on the spot. So I shall not
very
do
happy
that.
to share the positives, but not the negatives.
Okay.
Okay, amazing. I guess our listeners can think about that question and stay tuned to know for more questions that will come on your social media accounts. And Carolina, thank you honestly so much for being here and for being vulnerable and taking the time to talk with me about No Small Talk and your personal experience. It was really super nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
You've been listening to The Seat of the Muse, and I'm so grateful you chose to spend this time with me. If something stirred you today, a thought, a feeling, a question, I'd love for you to subscribe and follow on your favorite platform, leave a review, and even share this episode with a friend. Your support truly fuels this space and helps invite more voices to sit down with me. Until next time, stay curious.